Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking all things schedule congestion in women's football. We're going to break down numbers, injuries, research, and everything around international windows here on She Scores Bangers. We start off the week with an interview with an ACL researcher talking about the connection between ACL injuries and female athletes. To end off the week talking about congested schedules sounded like a very good idea because those two topics go hand in hand quite neatly actually. Schedule congestion has been quite an important topic the last few years. A lot of managers have come out and spoken about their players quite literally being fatigued and tired every time they come into a match or a training session. Players themselves have come out and spoken about it. Ex-players, pundits, journalists, everybody around the sport has recognized that this is quite a serious issue that nobody's really addressing. In fact, it almost seems like every year we have more matches, more games going on, more international breaks, which doesn't cater to the concerns at all. Right now, there's probably more than a ton of players out with injuries that are probably directly influenced by the schedule congestion. I was able to break down the schedules of 3 players that are currently sidelined with an ACL injuries, and if you look at the numbers, it's scary. We have Julia Gwynn, an incredible midfield talent, plays for Bayern Munich and Germany. She unfortunately sustained an ACL injury back in September of 2020. She returned in August of 2021 and only last month was hit with yet another ACL injury. And between her return date and injury date, she had played 56 matches of possible 65. This is obviously combined between club and country. 56 games for a player who just came back from an ACL injury is not a cool number at all. And this is not even saying that she played every possible game, because she didn't. Obviously, her minutes were being managed. She wasn't playing 90 minutes every game. But to play 56 matches out of the 65 that were available when you just came from an ACL injury is not cool. Now let's look at another player. Ellie Carpenter had her own first ACL injury in the Champions League final. But tracking back the last 12 months before her injury, she had played 51 matches, 18 of which were for the Matildas. And if you know a thing or two, Australia is quite far, considering she plays her football in France. So now, 18 matches, I want you to consider the amount of traveling that takes place between those games. The last player who we're going to look at is Alexia Putellas. She had played 60 games out of the 71 available games in the last 12 months leading up to her injury that she sustained in training. 60 matches is a lot of football games, and this is not even her playing the whole 71 that she could have played. Again, these numbers are club and country. Julia Gwynn, Alexia Putellas, and Ellie Carpenter have a lot in common. Not only are they out with an ACL injury, they're playing Champions League football, domestic cups, league cups, and are consistent call-ups for their national duty. Which kind of ponders the question of, does high-level competition have to come with fatigue and schedule congestion? Are we entering an era where we're going to see some players turn down big offers, turn down big European football in fear of congestion and fatigue? Now, obviously, that's a far-fetched question, but you begin to wonder, it's like, is this going to be the norm with high-level competition where players are going to have to deal with congestions and are going to have to deal with being injured? Now you may wonder, what kind of matches are we going to get rid of to solve some of this problem? It's an easy answer. International windows. Here's a list of the international windows that we had this year. I'm sorry, but this is just one too many tedious, unnecessary windows. This was obviously going to be a very busy year. You had the Asian Cup, the African Cup, the Euros. A lot of stuff were happening in the summer and even earlier on in the year, which is understandable. But then do you really need 3 back-to-back international windows right after the Euros? Absolutely not. Imagine going from Euros to preseason to starting off your league and then back into international window. It's simply ludicrous and hard to keep up with. In fact, I wouldn't even say hard to keep up with. It's impossible to keep up with. At the end of the day, these athletes are humans. They can't run like robots. And obviously for us fans, we might say, well, it's actually fun to watch. But in the long run, it's not going to be very fun to watch because you're going to be tuning into these friendlies. And a lot of your favorite players or a lot of players that are a core aspect of some of these teams and clubs won't be playing because they're going to be out with injuries. And if you think the schedule is looking any better next year, it kind of isn't. Following the World Cup, there's going to be 4 back-to-back international windows. What? Why? Why do we need a September window? Why do we need an October window? Sure, I could argue maybe for a November, December, but do we need those back-to-back windows right after preseason is done, right after they start kicking off their own leagues, and right after the World Cup? Probably we've been fed enough international games in the World Cup. Obviously, you can never get enough, but we've been fed enough that we're probably not craving any in September. I hope not. There's been a fair amount of research done on this, not nearly enough, and certainly not nearly recent enough, but the majority of literature does tell us that there's a significantly higher chance of a player getting an injury during a match. Those injuries are not usually minor injuries. In fact, they do tend to have a severer type. To have peak efficient recovery, the body needs 72 to 96 hours. A lot of these players are not hitting those hours, especially those that are traveling. Endurance, strength, and power are also shown to be at a fatigued level after a congested period. And here's this: knees actually need 72 hours to go back to their regular flexibility. Knees, congestion, ACL injuries, there is a very clear and blunt link between all those three. There's another brilliant study that suggests that knee strength is a lot more impaired after a congested period because of match fatigue. So clearly the links are there, the research is telling us something, but we're not doing much about it. And this is not an area of research that has damning evidence, like, yeah, absolutely, this is exactly what's happening. No, but whatever evidence is there, it's clearly supporting one narrative. There's still not enough research on how it affects performance, how it affects conceptual perception. Obviously, that's a huge thing of decision making, visual. I mean, there's so many things that actually go into performance that still have not been yet researched into. We need a lot more research. We obviously need a lot more research that take in female participants. Obviously, I know research is a big task. Research is not easy to conduct a study, to publish a study. It takes years, a ton of funding. Completely understand that. But we need this research. We need that proper link between sports and research. I'm certainly going to be leaving a lot of the research that I found and I'm talking about down in the description. There's a lot of stats involved in it, so if you don't like stats, you're maybe not going to enjoy looking at them, but certainly very valuable stuff to read through. Some of these international windows seem too tedious. Certainly some of them need to get scrapped, in my opinion. Another conversation we can talk about is qualifiers, Champions League qualifiers. Do we really need to see a runner-up go through that many rounds of qualifiers? Another question. But the main question that I want you to think on, and I really want you to share your opinions on, is that does that high-level competition have to come with fatigue, injuries, and congestion that players maybe are going to start staying away from it? That question obviously has a lot of layers to it. What are your thoughts? Is it far-fetched? Am I thinking too deep into it? Let me know. If you haven't checked out my ACL interview with Hannah Marmura, a PhD candidate specifically studying ACL injuries, please make sure to do so. There was a ton of information and a lot of valuable research that does tell us what is going on in the current state of female football. As always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow us on Twitter. I will see you later.